You know, I speak a lot, and I had a friend of mine knew that I was speaking today, and he said, now don't be nervous, and just make sure that, you know, just picture everyone like they were in their underwear. So.
You got very good sight in your underwear.
I was hoping for more girls, actually. An executive at Toyota, let's see if I can get my slide here. An executive at Toyota said, brilliant process management is our strategy. We get brilliant results from average people managing brilliant processes. We observe that our competitors often get average or worse results from brilliant people managing broken processes. The nugget of truth here is that everything that we do is the result of a process. Everything that we have is a result of a process. Just like a tree, every kind of a tree is a result of a certain kind of a seed, every outcome in your business and in your life and industry is the result of a process. And this is what TLS is about. Now, TLS, as you've heard already, stands for Theory of Constraints, Lean, Six Sigma. And there's way too many words there, so we had to have an acronym. Now, what is it? TLS is an integrated approach to continuous improvement. The core idea is to make continuous improvement a profit center. So many times when we do continuous improvement programs, what we do is we set up an organization and it's a cost center. It's also a systematic approach to improvement. And that approach contains a process of project governance, strategic deployment of continuous improvement efforts, and an alignment with the organizational goals and strategy of the organization. Now, that's aside from the tools, which I'll talk about in a minute. The idea is that TLS supports different situations with specific tools for that situation. So a hammer for a nail, a screwdriver for a screw, a pencil for a design. Now, TLS starts with the theory of constraints, of course. And the idea in the theory of constraints is to look at your process and the outcome of that process and try and find the limiting factor. Now, if I looked at my process that I have here and here, you would see that if each number represented the capacity of a specific resource, and I wanted to improve the process, wanted to improve the output of the process, well, what I would do is I would focus on that resource right there that has the least amount of capacity. And that becomes the leverage point for my improvement efforts in the system. Then I would apply my effort to that leverage point to increase the process, increase the output of my process. TOC, Theory of Constraints, in this context of TLS, continuous improvement, is about focusing, is about synchronizing everything to that leverage point. Now, it also uses Lean, and Dr. Holt talked about Lean briefly, but if you think about what Lean is, Lean has these principles of understanding what is the value that the customer will pay for, and then identifying the processes that create that value and driving waste out of those processes. Then create a flow of value to your customer, and then create a pull from your customer through your processes, and finally, pursue perfection. None of this is in conflict. Now, Six Sigma says that before we improve a process, we have to stabilize it. It doesn't make sense to improve an unstable process. So stabilize before you begin. Use real data. If you have it, use it. Use a scientific approach. Every output is a function of the input. So in Six Sigma, what we try to do is we try to find those key inputs that affect the outputs of our processes. Also in the Six Sigma movement, there's a strong emphasis on effective project management. Project management is actually part of the Six Sigma curriculum. Customers will always feel the variance. They don't feel the mean. And finally, every project must be financially driven. So TLS combines these three methodologies. We use TOC to create a systemic alignment with our strategy and with the values and the value that the organization is creating. We use Lean then to reduce the waste in the process for the value that's on the, let me back up a little bit. We use TOC for systemic alignment, but we also use TOC for focus to find the leverage point. And then we use Lean to drive the waste out of that process. And once we've done all that, then we work on perfecting the process with Six Sigma to reduce the variation. There's a certain sequence and there's a certain reason why we do that. So the process starts with this. First of all, let's create a structure for continuous improvement. Let's create a structure for managing the projects to ensure that we actually get something out of our continuous improvement efforts. Let's make sure that our goals of our continuous improvement teams are in line with what the strategy of the organization is. Too many times I've seen where management commissions Six Sigma teams or Lean teams or whatever kinds of teams and says, here, go improve. And they go and improve what? The things that they do not affect the strategy. Then, once we have a structure, we have a system, then what we'll do is we analyze the constraint and stabilize the global processes to make sure that we're not chasing our tail so we can really focus in on the things that are important. Then we drive out waste at the constraint. We exploit the constraint. Then we'll subordinate everything else and work to elevate the constraint and find that new constraint. So we end up with a process of continually focusing, continually improving, going on the red curve that Dr. Holt talked about. Now, many of you have seen the results of the Sanmina SCI results. But if you haven't read it, what Reza Parasta did was he created a design of experiment on continuous improvement methodologies. He had 22 plants implement implement Lean, implement Six Sigma, and implement TLS. 6 of the 22 implemented TLS. The design, the experiment ran for 2.5 years, and roughly 200 projects were completed in that 2.5 years. And what we see here is that those plants that use TLS returned almost 4 times more to the bottom line than those plants using Lean or Six Sigma alone. In fact, 89% of the benefit that the company received from continuous improvement efforts in that 2.5 years came from those 6 plants. 90% of the benefit. Now, for us, it's not a question of will it work, but what do we do? We know that all improvement has to come from a change in our process, right? But we also know that not every change is going to result in an improvement. So what's our expectation? Our expectation is every time we change something, It is going to improve, but what's the reality? The reality is that the improvements that we make most of the time, do not translate into real competitive advantage, do not translate into real bottom line improvement for the business. Now, the traditional approach is that we focus everywhere. And we say a cent plus a cent plus a cent will improve here, will improve here, will improve here, and eventually all of it will add up and we'll get an improved system. Now, the systems approach, all right, says that what we need to do is take the approach of Archimedes, who said, give me, if I can find the leverage point, I can move the earth. A bit of a paraphrase. But the idea here, to improve, we have to focus. Now, in 2007, Industry Week did a survey of plants in the U.S., and the question was, well, what continuous improvement tools are you using? 70% of the plants that reported to Industry Week said that they were using Lean. 34% TQM, 29% Six Sigma, 17% TPS, 14%, and so on and so on. So it's not like we're not doing anything. We're trying, but what's telling is the next question. How many of you feel that your business is making progress towards world class? And the result is that less than 25% of the plants find that they're making significant progress to world class. So that tells us that whatever we're doing is not working. Now, look, why isn't it working? A couple of reasons. Let's start with one. We know that what we're trying to do, if I'm the CEO and I'm commissioning my continuous improvement team, I want them to improve the system as a whole. I want them to return the investment that I'm making in that continuous improvement effort, all right? So I want them to get results, real results. So what do the continuous improvement teams do? Well, most of the time, what they do is they go and they focus at the biggest time wasters, or they focus at where's all the scrap. And that's not necessarily bad, all right? But we also need to have those continuous improvement teams focused on getting real business results, results that we can measure, which means that they shouldn't necessarily be focused on those biggest time sinks. So what happens is our continuous improvement efforts are caught between two opposites. On the one hand, we want them to focus on the big time wasters because that's real obvious and I can see it and I can get results. But on the other hand, I want to get the business results as well. So what do? Well, most of the time is that those continuous improvement teams, what they do is they go and they focus on the biggest time sinks. That's what they do. They go and find the longest times. They find the biggest time wasters. Most Kaizen events that I've been involved in are about time. Unless there's a significant business problem. If you've got a quality problem, all of a sudden all of your continuous improvement people are working on that quality problem. If you've got a delivery problem, all of a sudden all of your CI teams are working on those things. So what we see is that most of the time people are working on they're plugging along unless there's an emergency. Now, what happens? Well, most of those projects that we work on, they do not achieve the results that they were set out to achieve. Implementations are difficult. You read the literature, everybody talks about how long it is, how hard it is to do continuous improvement. And the overall company performance, as I showed you in that prior slide, overall company performance does not improve. Even though we're doing the right things, we're still not improving. And then management begins to lose confidence in the continuous improvement efforts. And we know how that shows up. Well, it shows up in a leveling off of results, but it also shows up in saying, well, we need to try something new. We tried that lean stuff, it didn't work. We tried TQM, that didn't work. We tried that TOC stuff, that didn't work. So management begins to lose confidence in what are fundamentally good things. And people become cynical about continuous improvement. And, oh yeah, here it comes again. Now it's, we'll just kind of keep our head down, let this one wash over us. And management is frustrated because they're investing this money, they're investing time, they're investing resources into these continuous improvement efforts, and nothing is happening. And of course, the last one. Well, I had two more. I thought this was the last one. And then people start to resist. Yeah, we tried that, and now we stopped doing that. And lastly, the problems that we set out to solve with our continuous improvement efforts are still there. I work with some large companies, and I've worked with some large and some small companies, and what I find is that the problems that they had 5 years ago, they still have them. Many times. So what's wrong? Well, the biggest thing in continuous improvement is that we focus on the wrong thing. So this is the major thing, is that we're picking the wrong stuff to work on. We think that by reducing the time, we're going to get more productive. We think that by somehow making our process faster, we're going to get more productive. And yes, that's true, but not all the time. So this is the first thing. This is why TOC, in combination with Lean and Six Sigma, is such a powerful tool. Because TOC, with these tools, help us really find that leverage point and get that alignment. Only the projects that are focused on that leverage point have any real return at all. Now, let's look at something else. This is a survey results from the Lean Enterprise Institute. And every year, they do a survey of Lean practitioners, and maybe some of you have seen this. And the question that they ask is, why or what are the biggest obstacles to your Lean success? And what you see there, number one, is middle management. Middle management is resisting. Number two is, well, we don't know what to do. Number three is employees are resisting. And number four is supervisors are resisting. Everyone is resisting. But what are they resisting? You see, the thing is that even within, look where financial results are. Financial value not recognized is the smallest one. What does this tell you about the focus of our Lean practitioners? They're not focused on financial return, they're focused on tool adoption. And in fact, this is what happens in a lot of our continuous improvement programs, is we get all caught up in the tools. Are we running Kaizen events? Are we doing 5S? Are we doing Poke-Yoke? Are we doing this kind of stuff? And the tools become the end and not the mean to the result. Look, there's been another example. Now, the Malcolm Baldrige Award. Now, the Malcolm Baldrige Award has gotten kind of a bad rap because there were some companies that won the Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award and they went out of business. And yes, that's true, but not lately. Quite a bit of research has been done on Malcolm Baldrige, on the award, and the practitioners, and the recipients. And what the research shows, or tries to, I did some research, and the first question here was, is there a causal link between the Baldrige criteria and actual performance? I mean, why would we pursue the Malcolm Baldrige award if it didn't help make our organization better? Now, what the research found was that all of the things that are in the Malcolm Baldrige Award, the different tools and so forth, are important. But the most important predictor of system performance, and here we're talking about financial performance, is leadership. It's not tool adoption. It's not, are you doing a good job with your quality program? Do you do great design of experiments? That's not the predictor of results. The predictor of results is leadership. Information and analysis is the second most important, so I don't want to discount that completely. What was interesting to me was process management. It's twice as important when predicting customer satisfaction than predicting financial results, which means that our emphasis on process improvement, which is typically focused on customers, it's a good thing, but it's not the leading indicator of, is our firm going to be more competitive? What's going to get our firm competitive is leadership, and not, are we really good at the tools? Have we got everybody trained on 5S? Do we have 65 Jonahs in our organization? That isn't what's going to get us competitive. That isn't what's going to get us to world class. So, what's wrong with most continuous improvement efforts? Why aren't we getting the results? Well, the first thing, like I said, the projects that the teams undertake are not geared towards the goal of the business. They're not focused. You've got teams here, teams here, teams here, teams here, and they're not going anywhere. They're focused on tool adoption. And how many black belts and green belts do we have? They're not focused on, are we getting the results that we want? And second, is that most continuous improvement processes and continuous improvement programs are not led. The CEO or the VP or whoever's responsible says, here, go do continuous improvement, and while I take care of the business. There's no structure to reinforce improvement or to manage the improvement process. You know, if I've got people in my organization, they're doing things, how do I know they're doing the right things? How do I know they're not surfing the internet all day? That probably wouldn't happen in your company, but I've heard it happening, yeah? The accountability for sustained improvements is not clear. Listen, why would a middle manager want to adopt lean? Because somebody from the corporate said, hey, let's do lean. Why would he want to do that when his performance review says nothing about getting that? Why would he want to change his process? What's in it for him? See, in our continuous improvement processes, there's nothing in it for management. There's nothing in it for the people who are actually working, and there's no follow-through. There's no alignment of what are we doing in our continuous improvement program with what's our goal, what's our strategy for this year. How are we going to use this continuous improvement program to help us reach whatever growth in market share or reduction in operating expense or improvement in product quality? How is it going to do that? The linkage doesn't exist. Teams are self-directed. They're not led. So two things. Projects on the wrong thing and we focus too much on tools and not enough on results, on the right results. TLS is about fixing these two things. Now, let's start with this. Measurements. What creates behavior in our organization? Often, it's the measurements, all right? And it's the measurements and the reinforcements, all right, for the behaviorists out there. It's really about what gets reinforced, what gets measured and then reinforced. That's what creates the results. So if you want different kinds of behaviors, if you want behaviors that are in line with what the goal is, what the strategy is, we have to start here. What are the measurements? We want people in the organization to understand what is the goal of the system. The goal of the system is not to satisfy the customer. That's not the goal. The goal is to make money. Now, we can't make money unless we satisfy the customer. But we have to be clear. Just like if I'm playing football, the goal of the offense is to score. The goal of the defense is to prevent scoring. But what's the goal of the team? To win. So our people have to be, these measurements, whatever measurement system we use, has to be crystal clear. What does winning mean? It has to be connected to the global measurements. If you're a publicly held company, your behavior is being driven by the market, whether you like it or not. So let's make sure that everyone's behavior is driven in the same way. Some people are here to make money, some people are here to collect a paycheck. Let's make sure that the goals of everyone are lined up. What's our strategy for creating a competitive advantage? What are the metrics that we're using? How do we connect the people who are working in the organization to the overall strategy? Now, I favor a simple approach. Simple, simple, simple. So, because I think that complicated processes, complicated systems do not work. They can work for a while, but they can't last. So, the first part of TLS is creating alignment and putting in a simple commissioning structure. Now, commissioning structure just means that the senior manager who has bottom line responsibility is the one who is commissioning the projects. No projects get done unless the guy who writes the check says that the project gets done. And people are accountable to them, and I'll show more about that in a minute. Then, once we have that, we do the constraint analysis. Where do we need to focus? Where is the constraint? It's not hard. I can take anyone in 3 hours, and we can walk through your plant or your business, and we can find the constraint and what's going to prevent you, or what's going to help you the most. Find your leverage point. Then we look at our measurements and make sure that we've got our measurements in line. Now, the big thing here in measurement is the abolishment of variance or absorption measures and moving to a simplified way of measuring performance in the organization. But importantly, we want to make sure that whatever measurements that we do have that are in line with our strategy, that they are visual to the people who are responsible. They can be seen by the people who are responsible for accomplishing the results. No one wants to play football without a scoreboard. But we do this every day in business. We tell people to do stuff, but we hide the scoreboard. Well, I'll tell you at the end of the year whether we won or lost. It's not a sin to tell people that we're behind. It's important that we want our people in the game. So a visual display is essential to creating a reinforcement mechanism, because what the visual displays do is they tell our people what we think as managers is important. What's important? It's on the board. What do we talk about? That's what's important. Now, let's talk about structure for a minute. A governance structure. Now, at the very top, we need champions. Now, the champions are the people with skin in the game. The champions are the people who are writing checks, who are accountable for getting the results. Now, I've got here on the slides, I've got them termed barrier busters. These are the people, they're not doing the work, but they're making sure that the right environment exists so the work can get done. Then we have leaders who are responsible for getting the results, for doing the work. All right? Or, well, I say not doing the work because that's the next level. But leaders are akin to your middle managers, your process owners. So continuous improvement is not a separate thing from our day-to-day work. Continuous improvement is our day-to-day work. So these leaders are accountable to the champions for getting results. And they are supported by experts. The worst mistake, I don't say the worst mistake, but a big mistake that you can make in your continuous improvement projects is to have your projects led by the black belts. They have no skin in the game. They're not accountable for the process. They're not accountable for what happens. They're support. So some of your black belts are probably out there squirming right now. But then we have the practitioners. These are the people who are actually working, the people who are doing the work. These are the people on the front line. They're what Six Sigma would call our green belts, the practitioners, the applicators. Now, we have one final component in our governance system, and that is finance. Now, I've got finance over here to get it done, but that's just because that's where that block fit in my diagram. But every project governance system must have a tie back to the finance. So if the project team says, yes, we got $100,000 a month improvement, that we have somebody there to validate that indeed we did get $100,000 a month improvement. So the financial person plays an important part in keeping everyone honest. Secondly, if you improve and you are able to actually reduce your operating budget by $100,000 a month, well, that $100,000 a month goes back in the kitty. Goes back to the company for to fund our continuous improvement efforts. My expectation for continuous improvement teams is that they pay for themselves 10 times every year. If they're not paying at least 5 times, then in real dollars, all right, either in improved throughput, reduced scrap, reduced operating expense, real hard dollars, then all of that investment that you've made in continuous improvement is being wasted. It's lost like water through a sieve. Now, once we have our governance system in place, then we stabilize the delivery process. Now, I have this first because so many companies are terrible at this. So many companies and organizations do not meet the basic needs of their customers, meaning Many of your organizations, it's probably not yours, but it might be over at that table over there, right? They're like restaurants. I like to think of your businesses like restaurants. And all of you have an awesome breakfast. And you've got the best cooks, the best equipment, the nicest facilities. But some of you, for some reason, you can't get the eggs to the customer while they're still hot. And you really struggle with that. Well, if you think about what the purpose of a restaurant is, it's to feed the customer, right? And what's the purpose of your business? To feed your customer. So, are the eggs still hot when they get to your customer? Probably not, right? So this is where we start. Before we go off and improve things and create a whole bunch of teams, continuous improvement teams, and we teach everybody 5S and 6 Sigma, let's make sure that we can get the eggs to the table while they're still hot. And so what we do is we do a level loadings, very simple, make sure that we can do simple stuff to satisfy the fundamental need of our customer before we get sophisticated. So I like to use simplified drum buffer rope. It's easy. It can be implemented in a couple of weeks. It doesn't require a computer. It's simple. We can get level loading easy just by controlling what goes into the system. And then we implement buffer management to close the loop on execution so we can get consistent execution. The eggs always come out while they're still hot. Then, once we've got that mastered, then we can go and improve. And we can start to drive out waste. And we'll do simple stuff, process mapping. I mean, how hard is process mapping, really? I mean, if you read some of the books, it's really hard, all right? I mean, some of the books, I mean, they're this thick. It must be really hard to do a process map. But, you know, I learned process mapping just by walking around and talking to people and, you know, stapling myself to an order. It's not hard, so don't make it hard. Staple yourself to an order. And I've got Texas-style quality function deployment here, all right? Look, quality function deployment, another great, complicated, deep subject, books up to here. Why not do it simple? It's not hard, all right? Who are the customers? What do they want? How do we meet their needs? You know, do we need any specialized training to do that? No, we just need to go and do it. So, simple, simple, simple. Keep it simple. What are our key process inputs? What are our key process outputs? Look, we don't have to, at this stage, let's make sure that we can swim in the shallow water before we put on our tanks and our diving mask. All right? Can we dog paddle? Great. All right, let's dog paddle for a while, and let's not make our jobs even harder than they are. Simple stuff like this will yield huge results. You think about, I was just thinking about your lean efforts, okay? Now, you don't have to raise your hand, all right? But I know many of you are doing lean. How lean is your lean implementation? Is there a lot of waste in your lean implementation? A lot of wasted effort? Think about it. Cause and effect analysis. I've got a simple fishbone diagram up here. You can teach someone to do fishbone analysis and ask the 5 whys in an hour. It's not hard. And see, the great thing about these kinds of things, these kinds of tools, these tools are easily taught, easily grasped, easily practiced, and they will get results. So we don't need to spend $1 million to have our people learn the fundamentals of process management. Now, so we go through this process, we drive all the waste out of the process, then our process is pretty good, pretty, we've driven most of the waste out of the process. Then we can work on some of the more sophisticated tools. And we can look at our process variables and find out, are they noise or are they really constant? Do these variables really affect the process outcome? We do visual work instructions. I've got visual work instructions in this section here because visual work instructions are about process reliability. Implement SPC. Use statistical process control. Yeah, this requires actual data gathering. But what happens is that these things create the foundation to do more sophisticated things later on. If you want to do design of experiments, or you want to do some more sophisticated analysis on your processes, having these sorts of things are going to give you a baseline so you can actually get some real information, some real data. And you're not guessing about, is my process better or not? So, how do we go forward? First, we create alignment in our process, in our continuous improvement process. All right? So, we have a sponsor, somebody with a budget, somebody that wants to make an investment. He's usually a senior guy. All right? The junior guys, they trust with small amounts. The big guys, they get bigger. And then we choose a team leader. And that team leader is a process owner. All right? Now, what process owner should be chosen? Well, I don't know. Where's the constraint? Where's the leverage point? And it doesn't matter if he's receptive or not, because a condition of his continued existence in the organization is that he improve his business. So we find out where the leverage point is, we find out who's going to be our guy, and then we do simple stuff, do tools training, simple stuff for the people who are actually going to be working on it, to line up our metrics, and then from there, we create a list of projects. And that's when we start. And we start to run our teams. And we apply the tools to improve the process, and we successfully complete our project. Now, just a thought here about the length of the project. Projects should not be any longer than about 60 days, 90 days. 90 days is a long project. Why? Because we're ADD, that's why, all right? We can't do a project that takes 6 months. The thing is, what we want to do is create a cycle of reinforcement. We want to reinforce our positive results. We can find projects where we can do quick things, simple things. If you've got a 6-month or a 1-year project, it's a big project, it's going to get lost. And then a year from now, people are going to forget who even signed the AFE, the capital request to get that project launched. So, short projects. Then we take the next level of training. All right, so we master the simple stuff, and we make sure that we can do what we can do well. Then we go to the next step. And I think I must have something here that's, there we go. Then we go back to the beginning. Now, let's look at the things that TLS, the problems, I guess, of the continuous improvement. All right? We're focusing on the wrong things. We don't put in the systems to succeed. In other words, we don't have a process to manage our continuous improvement process. So we get weird results. We don't link them to what the global strategies of the business are, and we get teams that are scattered. And we don't get a change in our culture. You know, Dr. Holt talked about the lean thinking Nothing changes. People stay cynical. We still have the problems. So TLS is focusing on the constraint, focusing on the leverage point. Make sure that your continuous improvement program has clear accountability. Somebody is writing a check, and whoever's writing that check is accountable for getting the job done. We put our projects on the constraint processes where they're really going to pay. And every continuous improvement initiative is tied and owned by the process manager who is going to run it. So if you want to do 5S, then the leader of the team is going to be the owner of that area. The thing that I want you to think about is continuous improvement as a culture change. But that culture change isn't about training a bunch of people. The culture change is about driving, is about leadership, and about driving results that matter. So, to summarize, what does TLS do? Fast, significant improvements. Big improvements. Improvements that matter. People will have the tools to own and manage their own processes. So rather than create an elite, the green belts and the black belts, what we do is we equip the people who are in the process to manage and run their own process. And we create a culture of continuous improvement where improvement isn't something that happens when we do a Kaizen blitz or when something crashes. Continuous improvement is just that, continuous improvement. TLS will give you significant progress towards world-class with zero capital investment. You do not need an AFE to do this. You just need to use your head and use the tools that you already have in a different way. Remember, progress is not about how great I am, but progress is about how great my process is. And this is really the goal of your continuous improvement effort. Now, I want to wrap up with a story. Albert Einstein, at one time, was actually, he was the famous guy that invented the theory of relativity, and he taught at university, master's and doctorate level physics. And of course, he had his teaching assistants. And one day, they gave an exam to his master's classes, and his teaching assistant realized that they had given the exact same test that they gave in the prior semester. Exactly, word for word. The teaching assistant was alarmed, horrified, because he was responsible for it. And how does he go and approach Professor Einstein and say, we made a mistake? So finally he works up the courage and says, we've made a mistake. We've sent the same test out. And Professor Einstein thought about it. He said, it's okay, because the answers have all changed. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in our businesses. Times change. We must change with it. Things change. We must change with it. Now, that concludes my performance, my presentation. I did want to let you know, give you a small commercial. I'm conducting a TLS Champions course in June in Houston and Seattle. I'll be around the rest of the conference, at least for today anyway. Thank you very much. I believe it's time for a break.